disclaimers, as always. There are some prerequisites to any of this. If you are not doing 300 dials minimum, if you're not setting 12 to 15 appointments minimum, if you don't have an understanding of the basics of the role and purpose and the financial fire drill and the why and the critical period concept, nothing that we go over here today is going to replace that. There's no like magic silver bullet that we're just going to get, oh, if I just ask these 15 questions in the why, I'm going to be good. No, we still need to make sure that we have those 15 appointments. Now, if you're doing virtual appointments, I know a lot of teams are switching to go over to 17, 18, 20 appointments a week. We heard plenty of Melissa Weigle's team and plenty of John Ziller's team talking about 600 dials being their floor instead of 300 dials. So certainly, consult with your upline, consult with, the people that you're kind of in direct mentorship with, and make sure that you guys are on the same page with activity. But the main message is this isn't just a one-stop fixes all here. We got to make sure we have a good understanding of the basics. And we highly suggest reading these two books, Go for No and The Slight Edge. These are two books that are integral to your success at Symmetry. I can't put it any other way. They are both very short books. You can read these books in probably, I would say 90 minutes, maybe a couple hours each. They're very short. They're almost like pamphlets. Slight Edge is a little bit longer than Go for No, but Go for No is something that you can read very quickly. But these two books are paramount to your success at Symmetry, is understanding Go for No and Slight Edge. So if you're a new agent, if you haven't gotten to the point yet where you're doing, the minimum number of dials that your hierarchy says to do, if you're not setting your 12 to 15 appointments and getting that participation, make sure to, go to the resources that are available to get you up to speed. So the sales training videos that are on sfglife.com, Symmetry U, the SoundCloud channel to pick up, for instance, Ayers and Sicily's role and purpose, or running a fire drill in the home. There's a number of great recordings on SoundCloud about the why and asking questions in the why. There's amazing recordings on the critical period concept and the equity protection plan and that stuff, all available for you at the bottom down here. So if we need to get to that point first, then please get to that point first before you just start instilling this stuff. Because we certainly don't want to mess you up by having you put the cart before the horse. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is what I call the 15 questions of the why. And let me admit Eric here and then turn off the waiting room. Sorry about that, guys. Eric, welcome. All right, so the 15 questions of the why, and we'll get Eric to chime in here in a little bit as well about kind of his takes on this, because he does a lot of this. But the key point is that when we're sitting with a client, whether that be in person, whether that be over the phone, whether that be on a Zoom meeting, we always want to be curious. And we heard Cicely Newsome in her Monday morning training call, highly suggest listening to that. It was one of the best training calls that I've ever heard, talk about asking quality questions and just leading into the appointment being curious. All of your questions coming from curiosity and just being almost playful with the way that you ask some of these questions. And that's what we're going to be talking about here in the why. Oh, here we go. So the overview of this is, right now we should all know the old adage, right? People buy on emotion and they justify with logic. And the process that we take clients through is an emotional process. Every client that you sit with has emotions that we need to expose, and pretty much most of the clients that you sit with are not going to be willing up front to just get into those emotions. We need to help them get there. So one thing I always want everybody to keep in mind is these are the 50% of the 50% of the 1%. And so what does that mean? Well, we get a 1% return, or Symmetry gets a 1% return on the letters that they send out for mortgage protection or for final expense, right? So we're already talking to the 1% of people who took the time to fill out that form. Now, how many people took the time to fill out that form that we actually got on the phone and we got into contact with and we were able to book an appointment with? Well, if you're A leads and bonus leads and you're doing kind of a mixture, it's about 50% of the people that you talk to are going to book an appointment with you. And then how many of them are actually going to show up and meet with you and be engaged in the process, right? It's probably another 50%. That may be a little low, but we're dealing with, if they have filled out a form, they've mailed it in, right? They've talked to you on the phone. Maybe you're the second or third person they've talked to on the phone, right? If it's a bonus lead, they've given you all their medical information. They've given you their personal information. They've set an appointment with you, and then they've showed up to that appointment. They are a very small percentage of people that have an emotional need inside of them. Nobody's jumping through all of those hoops if they don't want to buy insurance. Yeah, they all have a concern. They all have a need. They all want to buy insurance, but people in general want to fight off being sold. Nobody likes to be sold, right? So we put up these defense mechanisms. And I tell a story a lot about going to Men's Warehouse and wanting to buy a suit. And I wanted to get a suit for conference. I wanted a royal blue symmetry suit. I wanted to spend, I want to spend $600 and get this suit just out. Cheap royal blue suit. Just going to wear it at conference. Probably not going to wear it again. And I went in, and the first couple guys who were there were asking me, "Hey, can we help you? Can we help you find something? You need any help with anything?" And of course, my fear of being sold was like, "Nope, just looking. Nope, sorry, just looking. Get away from me." And like an hour and 20 minutes later, after like foraging through suits and stuff, I finally went and asked one of the guys for help. And within 10 minutes, he had the exact suit that I wanted and the price point that I wanted, and it made my life a heck of a lot easier. But I was afraid of being sold. Right. So that's one of the keys to kind of remember here, is that everybody that we sit with, is my belief that if they're sitting with us and they showed up to this appointment to meet you, they are sold on insurance. They want to buy insurance, and we just need to uncover their concerns. So every level that we get closer to layering off that onion, right? Every level we get closer to their concerns is a level closer to getting them coverage. So when should I share my why? This is going to vary in your hierarchy, and I absolutely suggest to speak directly with your mentor, whoever that mentor is, about when they're coaching you, when they share their why, when you should share your why. This is my personal feeling, and some of the people that we've kind of developed these trainings with, that a lot of times with new agents, what happens is we kind of get forced into sharing a why, and then it can almost become like the appointment is about you, and can totally take us off track because we're sharing this long, elaborate story about our why and why we're passionate about insurance and why we got into insurance and why we chose symmetry and why we want to keep the appointment being about them. We're there to cover them. We're there to help their family. And so there's a couple pointers that I typically give out, and this is my rule of thumb. When I am having trouble getting them to get into their emotion is when I'll break into mine. It's almost like giving them permission. I'll share my story. I have a very significant why story, right? Eric knows, and a few other people have heard my why story of my father was in a major accident, lost his right leg below the knee, lost his left foot, fractured his spine, and it was an insurance policy that, paid off the house and allowed him to, allowed my, stepmother to help take care of him and paid for my college, and it's paying for my sister's college, so those are the things that, the why, when I'm sharing my why, I want to get them at least to open up, but I don't necessarily want to go in and just tell a whole long, elaborate story about myself unless it's necessary. And so this is where, again, I know a lot of hierarchies operate differently, and please, talk with your mentor, kind of see what they would suggest and how they're going to coach you, because I'm not necessarily coaching you unless you're direct to me on a one-on-one basis. But when you're having trouble building rapport, maybe this is where you share a why story, why you're passionate about insurance, why you love what you do, why you're happy to be at Symmetry, what a story that you've heard before of somebody else. I had a coworker who told me this, or I heard a story on a conference call where somebody else who works for my company had XYZ happen to them, and you're borrowing other people's stories to help build rapport. Or the third place is if a concern of theirs comes up and it matches yours. So if you have a story, you have somebody who's passed away in your family who was either affected or not affected because they had insurance, or if you have some kind of similar passionate story that's what they're sharing, and you want to use that moment to seize some rapport, awesome, like do that. But if you don't have any of these scenarios present, you may just be wasting some of their time and some of their attention by telling a 5 or 10 minute story of your why and why you're passionate, right? So I always think it's kind of like a doctor, right? When we're asking these questions, a doctor isn't going in saying, no, anything that I ask you, you can feel free to ask me right back, right? A doctor's not hesitant in asking you for information. They're going, hey, you came to see me as a doctor. I need to know this, and this. And this is how we ask these questions in the financial fire drill, in the why, is just like a doctor. So don't be hesitant, just jump in. So how do I find my clients' why? We start asking why questions on the phone. When we're booking the appointment, we're asking, who did you fill this form out for? Was it for you or your spouse? Who would be your beneficiary? How important is this to you? We're asking these why questions on the phone call, and we can use this as a lead-in in the sales meeting. And so after we're done with our role and purpose or our financial fire drill, or wherever you're getting into the why with them, and you're showing them the lead, we can ask, hey, when we were on the phone, you told me XYZ. You said that the reason why you filled the form out and you mailed it in was because of that. You told me your children would be your beneficiary. Is that accurate? What would happen if, and we start leading into the why questions. But really, we're going to start with the most basic and obvious question, which everybody should know, right? It's in the real system form that you can get on sfglife.com. It's on all of the real system in-home, trainings that are out there, which is some form of this question. When you filled this form out, what were you hoping this would do for you? What were you hoping this coverage would do for you? Why did you mail in this form? What was your thought process behind it? Whatever it is that you're asking, it's going to start with, why did you fill this form out? So this is where a lot of people, especially like when you're new, and I was victim to this when I was new, a lot of people are going to stop at one or two answers. When you filled this form out, what were you hoping to accomplish, or what were you hoping this coverage would do for you? Well, if I die, I want my wife to have the house paid off. And we go, okay, great, perfect. So let's get into prices, and that's not getting to the deep emotional portion of the why. That may be the surface level portion of the why, but we really remember every layer that we get deep into the why is going to get them one step closer to getting coverage. Okay. I like to say that the coverage is the ice and the questions of the why are the burn. So we're creating the burn right now. We're creating that uncomfortable feeling that they're not really recognizing on a daily basis that they have. And we're getting them to the place where they're going to be really uncomfortable. They're going to feel like they definitely need coverage. They can't go any longer without coverage. And now the prices that we're presenting to them are the ice that's kind of soothing that burn of uncomfortability, right? So what were you hoping that this form would do for you? Or what were you hoping that this coverage would do for you? I've just put a bunch of different why questions here. There's a million of them. But why this is called the 15 questions of the why is my belief that you shouldn't ask any less than 15 questions during the why. We should have at least 15 questions. And it's very easy to ask these questions and just one off. And we're going to do some role playing here in a minute. You guys can see how fast you can fire off these questions. But I'll give you a couple of examples. And there's a bunch of these. There isn't a shortage of questions that you can ask if you're curious in the whys. So why did you fill this form out? Well, if I pass away, I want the house to be paid off for my wife. Okay, well, tell me what would happen if you passed away? Well, where would she go? Where would your wife go? If you passed away, would your wife want to stay in the house, or would she want to sell it? If she wanted to stay in the house, could she stay in the house? Does she have enough money to stay in the house? Does she make enough income? What do you have set up? What's the plan if you didn't have this coverage? Where would she go? If she doesn't have the money to pay for the house, where would she go? Is there family nearby? Right? Is there another state? Would she go to another country? Are there kids involved? Where would the kids go? Where would the money come from for her to pay for the kids and for her to pay for, the rent on a new place? Or, where, if a family member is involved, how would it be living with that family member? Would the kids have to change schools? Who would take care of the kids if you both died? right? What would happen if you had a major illness? And this is where we start getting into, like kind of the secondary questions. So so imagine if you had cancer and you had to go through radiation and chemotherapy and maybe surgery or something like that, and you couldn't work because you were going through all that stuff, how would this mortgage get paid? Let them answer. Again, I'm a doctor, just like I'm filling out my chart and taking notes. So if you had a major illness like this, you were going through radiation and chemotherapy and maybe surgery, and you weren't able to work, how would this mortgage get paid? Let them answer. We're putting the pressure on them, right, to realize what's really going on inside that made them fill that letter out. Do you know anybody who this has happened to? Have you ever seen anybody who's gone through cancer treatment? Do you know anybody who's lost their house because of having to go through cancer treatment or because of a death or something like that? Do you know anybody who's died unexpectedly? Oh, yeah, my uncle, oh, my cousin, oh, my brother died. He had a heart attack. He was 51. How old are you? 48. Oh, so what, does that run in your family? Yeah, my dad had cardiac issues too. Oh, okay. So are you going to be the one that doesn't have that? Right? Like like that. There's another question in the why. Like, do you think you're the one that's not going to have one of these illnesses, or is that part of your concern? Is that your family members have had this, and what if the same thing happens to you? How long have you? I love this one. I got this one from Eric Farron. It transformed my business. How long have you been thinking about getting this coverage? And it's funny when you ask this question and the why, because sometimes like the husband will be like, oh, since we got the house, and the wife will be like, we've been thinking about this for like 8 years. We've been getting all kinds of prices. We've been looking online. I've wanted to get coverage forever, and sometimes it's flip-flop. I don't want to seem like it's always the husband or wife that's leading that conversation, because sometimes it's flip-flopped where he's like, man, I've wanted to get coverage for a long time. I just haven't been able to actually sit down and figure it out. But asking this, how long have you been thinking about getting coverage, leads us into what we're going to go in next, is where to use the why as you're closing. I love this one personally. How does it make you feel to know? So this is, they got no coverage. We've already gone through the financial fire drill. We know that if he died, she's not going to be able to pay the bills. They don't have any money in savings. They have very little money in savings. There's not a lot of equity in the house. They got some kids. There's definitely a clear need for insurance, as we've laid out in the financial fire drill. And so I love posing this question. How does it make you feel to know that if you left the house and something happened, that your family may not be able to stay in the house? How does it make you feel to know that? I even go a little bit further and ask, doesn't it just gnaw at you, like kind of subconsciously every day, that like if something happened to you, that they wouldn't be okay? And like the answers that you're going to get here are going to be astonishing. And it's like, if you're a little bit premature, giddy about it, you may just jump all over one of the answers that they give without just acting like a professional and continuing in your process and asking these questions. So do you know anybody who's lost their house? We asked that. What kind of life would you want your kids to have? In a perfect world, if you had this coverage, what would it look like? Right? What would your kids be doing? Would this coverage be paying for their college? Would this coverage be paying for them to own a house? Would this coverage be going to your grandkids? What kind of life would your wife be living if you had this coverage? In an ideal world, without price, if you had all the coverage that you wanted to have, what would it do for you? Right? If you were disabled, who would take care of you? I've written a ton of policies on this question alone, off of somebody going like, oh, damn, if I was disabled, I guess my wife would have to take care of me. I don't want my wife to have to take care of me. I don't want my wife to have to, like if I couldn't go to the bathroom on my own, to help me go to the bathroom on my own. I don't want to have to put her through that. Follow up to this question. If you were disabled and your wife was the one who'd have to take care of you, and she's working, would her income be affected too? Would she have to take time off work because she's taking care of you? Yeah, definitely. Right? What's the plan if you don't have this, right? So it's like we keep coming back to these questions, but these are all like you should be able to do 15, 20, 25 questions in a why within a span of, we're not taking 20 minutes here. Like we're in a span of 5 to 7 minutes here in a why, digging into that deep rooted concern. And it may be many deep rooted concerns in their why. But the more of these questions that we ask and the deeper that we get into the why and the more that we can put these people on the spot, right? The more that when we present those prices, the relief is going to come. Be like, oh my God, there's a solution. Thank goodness. You know what I mean? And I always remember, Brian Delaney talking about your income in this industry is going to be directly proportionate to the value that you bring to the marketplace. Right. And how many people are asking these questions? We're in an industry of quote givers, right? We're not necessarily in an industry full of caretakers. And there's a lot of people who just like shoot out quotes, email quotes. Oh yeah, you need this, you need this, you need this, without really ever considering why, what somebody's concern is. How many times have I sat in a home and, somebody was like, yeah, the guy came out, he showed us these prices. And it was like $220 a month for full coverage. And that was too expensive for us. And I went, well, let me ask you this. If you died, would you stay in the house? He's like, no. It's a slam dunk. No, neither of us would stay in the house if the other one died. He goes, well, then why do you need full coverage? Don't you just need enough money to kind of get out of this house and get it sold and get the equity out of it and move all the stuff out? And just asking that question goes, clearly the other people that they got quotes for weren't even asking why they needed coverage or what their actual concerns were. And when you can get to this place where you're asking these questions and then using their answers as ammunition in the close, which is where we're going to next, they know you're listening. They know you care about them. They know you want to help. They know you're genuine, and they're going to trust you a little bit more when it comes to actually delivering on your promises, on the policies. So where do we use this? In a close. So the first place that we want to use this is covering the think about it. And so I'm just going to use a hypothetical example, and then we'll start role playing a little bit. Let's say I'm with Jennifer Tongol here, and I ask her what she's concerned about, and she goes, well, I have life insurance already. If I die, we're all good, but I'm concerned that if I get diagnosed with cancer, that I'm not going to be able to pay for our mortgage. I'm not going to be able to keep up with the bills. I don't want my husband to have to, take care of me if I get sick. And, we're flushing this out. What would happen? Do you know anybody that's happened to? Tell me about that. Oh, it was your aunt. Oh my gosh, what happened? Tell me the story. Oh yeah, I watched this. Was she in the hospital? Did she have to go into a nursing facility? Did she miss work? What happened to their house? I want to know all the details surrounding the picture that's in Jennifer's head of what she's afraid of, because that's the emotion that probably influenced her to fill that form out and mail it in, right? And be that 50% of 50% of 1%. I'm drawing all that out. And so when I cover the think about it, I want to say something like, okay, Jennifer, so look, I think that we can both agree that we probably need to put some coverage in place today. I mean, we went through your financial fire drill, and it seems like, you'd be in kind of a tough spot. And obviously you shared with me the story about your aunt and some of your concerns. And I think we can agree that we need some coverage here. The one thing that I want to say before I kind of show you some options is my job is to get you covered. And, a lot of the times I'll go over some options with people, and I'll hear, I need to think about it, or I need to pray about it, or we need to sleep on it, or we need to talk to our dog about it, or our doctor about it, or whatever. And really, I know I've been doing this long enough to know what that means. And usually that just means it doesn't fit in the budget, right? So what I'm going to do here for you today is we're going to find something that fits in your budget. And I can do all kinds of stuff behind the scenes. But right now, even having a little bit of coverage for you is better than what you have, which is zero coverage. Wouldn't you agree? So all that I would ask is, let's be honest with each other. And if the price is just outside of the budget range, tell me, because I can find something here that can fit. And so I want to paint the story as I'm going over the think about it of what her concern was. If her concern was, if I die, there's nobody to take care of my kids. Or if I die, my kids are going to have to go live with their grandmother, or, we're going to have to sell the house if my husband dies, and I'm going to have to move back to wherever. And I don't want that to happen. And so now I'm like, hey, so we want to put something in place so that, you know, if the worst does happen, you're not moving back to wherever with whoever. If something does happen, right, your kids have something that your mother-in-law can help take care of them with, right? And having something is better than right now what you have, which is zero. Okay, so we want to get something put in place now. So if the price is a little bit too much, just tell me, we'll find something that fits for you, okay? Then we're going to go into presenting the options. So now we're actually showing the prices. And as we're going over the options, we're also going to reference the why. And so, hey, here's option number one. This is full mortgage coverage, let's say, $250,000, whatever the mortgage coverage is. And so I'll go through if Jennifer's concern was, oh, I'm afraid if I have cancer, if I have a major illness, I'm going to remind her of the living benefits here and go, hey, Jennifer, so here's this $250,000 in coverage. This is going to pay out, again, in a number of different ways. Number one, if you pass away, of course, it's going to pay out. Number two, if you have a critical illness, remember we talked about that. That was your main concern. This is also going to pay out, and you're going to be able to make the mortgage payment and pay your bills and stuff like that. If you have a chronic illness and you have a sort of a disability that prevents you from doing those activities of daily living for those 90 days, remember we talked about that. That's going to cover you. And I'm using that why to really focus in on how I'm presenting the price. And I'm not saying, oh yeah, Jennifer already told me that if she dies, she's good. She's got that $300,000 life insurance policy she got a couple of years ago. So when I present the prices, I'm not going, yeah, so if you die, you got this $250,000. That wasn't her concern. Her concern was, her deep-seated why was, I don't want to end up like my aunt ended up, losing her house when she had breast cancer and, you know, like having to move back with her parents. And so I can paint that entire picture. So if something were to happen to you, if you were to get diagnosed with cancer, this money would be able to pay out, and you wouldn't be at any risk to kind of, you know, have what happened to your aunt there, and you wouldn't have to go, you know, live with your parents again. You'd be able to go through treatment and get what you need to get done and keep your house. And is this kind of what you're looking for? And go back into the close right there with their why. Same thing when we go into like, oh, well, that's too expensive, full coverage. Now maybe we're going to half coverage or partial mortgage, or you're going to the critical period or the equity protector, and you're leaning back on covering their concern and covering the why and the think about it. Some coverage is better than no coverage. Let's get a little bit of coverage in place so that if XYZ happens, you're not experiencing what you're afraid of experiencing. So that you, because let's say it's a truck driver. And a truck driver's like, man, I'm out on the road all the time. Or the one thing that's huge with truck drivers is, I don't know if you guys know this, but if you're a truck driver and you have a CDL, commercial driver's license, and you have a stroke, your CDL is gone, basically, right? Your whole life and livelihood of being a truck driver after you have a stroke is pretty much out the window. And so it's a good one to present when I'm talking to a truck driver and go, yeah, man, have you known anybody who's had like a stroke or a major illness and their CDL got taken away? Yeah. What'd they do? Man, I don't know, but it must have been terrible. What would happen to you if that happened? And now when I'm in the close and I'm showing them the price and I'm going, hey man, you're making $150,000 a year doing this. Well, you know, hey, this option number one, this $300,000 a year, if you were to have a stroke and that stroke were to be severe and the critical illness were to kick in, you know, this is how much money you'd be getting to kind of replace your income while you recover from the stroke and you move on into your next career. I'm harping on whatever they told me in the why was their concern. Whatever we uncovered, we're bringing back up when we present prices. And then the third place is locking the sale down. And in locking the sale down, I always ask, can you tell me in your own words what we did here today? What's the coverage that we put in place? I want you to explain it to me because I want to make sure that you understand it. And you'd be amazed how many clients I get that are just like, well, if we die, it's going to pay out. It's like, yeah, how much? Do you remember the coverage that we got here? How many homes have I gone into or Eric's gone into? Or how many people have we met on Zoom that were like, they're like, yeah, I got a policy from somebody. And we're like, awesome. What's the death benefit? I don't know. Or how many people have been like, oh yeah, it's going to pay off my entire mortgage. And then we see it and it's a $10,000 policy. right? Like it happens all the time. People don't know what they got. And I want to make sure that I'm not in that position. So as I'm locking the sale down, explain to me back in your own words, right, what we did here today, what we accomplished. And as they're explaining back to me, I just want to reiterate their concern. So Jennifer, you got it exactly right. Great job paying attention. That was so great. You have no idea how many people I meet that don't remember, what they have and what they got. I just want to make sure that you're not in that boat. So you're right. If you were to pass away, this $250,000 pays out. But remember, your main concern was if you were to have a critical illness, you don't want to end up like your aunt who had to go and seek treatment and move back in with her mom and lost her job and lost her house. This is going to kick in to protect you from that. And that's our main concern and was our main goal here, right? How does it feel to know that if something like that happened, you'd be covered? Lock it. You know what I mean? Like super lock it down. How does it feel? I asked them how it felt to not have the coverage. Terrible. So terrible. It's burning. I got to get this option from you. I got to put the ice on this burn. And now a lot of times if you're using an instant approval process, like America or some of the other carriers that we have that give you an instant approval and instant coverage, or if you're using another carrier that has a temporary coverage agreement, right? And you feel very confident that they're going to get approved, and you can say, great, you're covered right now. You have a temporary coverage agreement as long as you would get approved by this carrier. If you died tomorrow, if you got diagnosed with cancer tomorrow, you'd be covered, right? As long as this policy would get approved. How does it feel to know right now that if you walk out that door tomorrow and something happens, that you're covered? I want you to experience the relief, right? This all came from the why. I'm revisiting all of those subconscious reasons they filled out that letter, right? And they mailed it in and they set up the appointment and they took time out of their life to meet with me at the end of the sale. And if we're not taking time to do this, we're just missing out. You're missing out on extra sales. You're missing out on that lockdown. You're missing out on retention rate. You're missing out on referrals, right? Like to really take the time and not just be a wham, bam, I'm out of here. I got my sale. I'm headed for the hills. And to go, Cicely suggested in her recording, why didn't you guys choose the cheaper option? Can I just ask, why didn't you go with the cheaper option? Why'd you go with this option? Right. And get them to double lock down why they went with this option. I love that you're choosing between option A and option B rather than choosing between option A and no option. That's a great retention tool. So I always bring the why back up in these three places. And in all the people that I've talked to, I think even Eric, who's, I want to invite in to say a few words on this. I think even Eric innately does a lot of this too, because everybody that I talk to that's had success in symmetry, that I've kind of interviewed about this topic, they're usually bringing up the why in these places again, and they're reiterating the client's why all throughout the process. You may do the why immediately starting the appointment and show them the lead right when you get in and start talking to them about the why. You may do it like me, which is after the financial fire drill and after the role and purpose. That's where I do the why. You may do it all throughout and ask little why questions every step along the way, right? But every person that I've talked to that is having long-term sustained success in symmetry is bringing back up the why in these places after they've uncovered it. They're asking at least, 10, 15, 20 questions in the why. My personal suggestion is minimum of 15. And then they're using all that ammunition to present the options and to cover the think about it and to lock the sale down at the end. And hopefully, you guys can kind of practice this and start doing it. Eric, you have anything you want to throw in and kind of cover on this?
There was a lot of really great points. I took a snapshot of those 15 questions. I love that. And, you can do that at any time. A lot of times, some of those questions, I'll do those through my whole process as I'm gathering information too. But me personally, I like to talk about the why right after my role and purpose. So, I'll tell them my role and purpose, and then I'll let them know that, the reason why I do this and the reason why I believe in mortgage protection insurance is because my uncle was killed in a motorcycle accident head on with the truck in Ohio. And or I'll talk about my godson who died before his 21st birthday in an accident. Or if I'm talking about living benefits, I'll talk about my son having epilepsy and us being able to get a policy that covers living benefits. So whatever you're going at, and sometimes I'll bring all three up throughout a conversation. So I really like the way you put that. Once again, it is, definitely plug in with who you're direct to. But a lot of these questions, I kind of go through the gathering process. As I'm going through the sales process, I'm asking them these questions exactly like the way Ryan presented it. Well, would you stay in the house if something happened to Mr. Sanchez? No, I would, and a part of that is identifying what type of policy you're going to write too. Because if someone tells me that they're not going to stay in the home, that they would sell it, I know I'm going into the critical period concept. I know that they probably are not looking to cover the whole mortgage. And I know that I have to look at that also. But if they say they want to remain in the home, that, yeah, I would stay in the home, this is my home for the rest of my life, well, then I know that we need to cover the whole mortgage. So these questions really come into play in so many different avenues. Touching on locking it down, I remember my first week that I actually wrote apps. It was my third week in Symmetry, and I actually wrote apps off of a lead. I went for a while, believe it or not, without some success on writing business on my leads. And when I finally went out and I wrote like 5,500 in premium, and I called Griff Martin. I was so excited, and I called him. I said, "Hey, Griff, I just wrote like 5,500. He goes, "That's awesome. That's great. How many apps did you write?" I wrote 4 apps or 5 apps. He goes, "How'd you lock it down?" And I said, "What?" And then he started going into, how did you want to lock the sale down. So you want to lock it down. You want to remind them of why they did this, or why, and I love that, bringing back their why, bringing back their reason for doing this, that we gathered through that presentation. So like, as I'm sitting there, I'm writing notes down. I'm taking down notes about what they're telling me. So when we do get to that point, I can remind them why we did this. So I love it. Everything was just spot on.